In today's lesson, we are going to talk about order of operations. Now, Alex and Paul are working on the same math question, and 6 plus 5 times 7 minus 2. Now, Paul does it, and he says it's 75. So let's see what Paul did. Now, Paul knows that math is its own language, and we read from left to right. So he says, I'm going to solve this problem from left to right. So I'm going to add 6 plus 5, and I'm going to get 11. Now notice he wrote everything else very nice and neat and organized. And then he says, okay, I'm going to multiply 11 times 7, and I'm going to get 77. And the last thing he says is now I only have to subtract 2. So 77 subtract 2 is 75. So Paul feels pretty happy about himself. But then Alex says, I don't think so. I got 39. So let's see what Alex did. So here we have the same question, and Alex says, I'm going to do the multiplication first. So he does the multiplication, 5 times 7, he gets 35. So then he has 6 plus 35 minus 2. Now he says, I'm going to take 6 plus 35, and he gets 41. And then he's going to subtract 2, and he gets 39. Now the question becomes, they can't be both correct, so who's right? Well, there is an order in which you need to follow when you're simplifying something like that question. Imagine if you had engineers building a bridge and they couldn't agree on the calculations. What would happen? That's right, there would be lives in danger at that pace. So mathematicians came along and they said, we need to make sure that everybody follows the same order when they're solving, so we get the same answer. So they developed something called order of operations. And it's also known as PEMDAS. Now, PEMDAS is an acronym, and it stands for, the P stands for parentheses. And what that means is that whenever you see parentheses, you always do that first. Whatever is inside, that's what you do. Now, we have heard of exponents, I'm sure, but we're going to be talking about that in a future lesson. So for now, we're just going to say that's what the E stands for. Then we have multiplication and division, and these are grouped together. And we solve them in the order in which they appear from left to right. Same with addition and subtraction. They are also grouped together, and we also solve from left to right. So again, PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. So how does that work? Well, sometimes people like to use different things to help them remember. And one of the things that you may or may not have heard is something called please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And I actually kind of like it, so I say it to myself. And it just simply is a way to remember that P stands for parentheses, E stands for exponents, M is multiplication, D is division, A is addition, and S is subtraction. So that's where please excuse my dear Aunt Sally comes from. Now, depending on where you're from, PEMDAS is also sometimes called BEDMAS, but these mean the same thing. The B in BEDMAS stands for brackets instead of parentheses. You still follow the same order of operations, it's just a different way of saying it. So the one thing that's important that you have to remember is if you have parentheses, and there is more than one operation inside the parentheses, then you need to follow order of operations inside parentheses before you move on to the rest of the question. So let's solve this following question using PEMDAS. The first thing you want to ask yourself is, are there parentheses? And in this case, there are, so yes. So we're going to solve what's inside parentheses first. 8 plus 3 is 11. And then we ask ourselves, are there exponents? Well, no, there aren't. Is there multiplication or division? Why, yes, there is. So let's go ahead and do that. And when we multiply 6 times 11, we get 66. There's nothing else to do, so you're done. Let's move on to the next question. 5 minus 4 times 3. Again, ask yourself, are there parentheses? And in this case, there aren't. Are there exponents? No, there's not. Is there multiplication or division? Well, yes, there is. There happens to be a multiplication. This dot says multiplication, so we do that first. So 4 times 3 is going to give us 12, so we have 5 minus 12 when we simplify. So then we ask ourselves, finally, is there addition or subtraction? And the answer, of course, is yes, we have a subtraction. So 5 subtract 12 gives us -7. Now, this is a much longer question, but we follow the same steps. We ask ourselves, are there parentheses? And the answer in this case is no. Are there exponents? No. Are there multiplication and division? Well, indeed there is. There are 2 multiplications, 2 times 3 and 4 times 5. So we do those multiplications and we see that 2 times 3 is 6, 4 times 5 is 20. And last, we ask ourselves if there's addition and subtraction, and there is. So we do addition and subtraction from left to right. So 6 plus 6 is 12. So we're left with 12 minus 20. When we do that subtraction, we get -8. And so our final answer is -8. 25 divided by, parentheses, 9 minus 2 times 2. Now I said in a previous slide that when you have parentheses, then you have to use order of operations inside parentheses. So since we have the parentheses and there's more than one operation, let's just bubble it out and let's solve that first. So 9 minus 2 times 2. We know that we have to do the multiplication first, so we take the 2 times 2 and that is 4. So we have 9 subtract 4. And 9 subtract 4 is going to leave us with 5. So inside parentheses, that becomes 5. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to simplify and we get 25 divided by 5. Now there's only one operation left to do, which is your division, and 25 divided by 5 is 5. All right, so going back to the question that we started in the beginning, who is correct, Paul or Alex? Well, let's look at what Paul did. Paul said, I'm going to do addition first, and that is incorrect. We now know that we have to start with the multiplication, and since Alex remembered PEMDAS and he did his multiplication first before the addition, he ended up getting the correct answer. And that's your lesson on order of operations.